Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Talkin Design with Matt.
And
And
Katie. We'll nail it
we're
next
back.
time.
We'll nail it. We'll get there. So welcome back. This is episode 4, and today we have a special guest who we'll announce really shortly. But Katie, I
Matt,
don't know what I was going to say.
no, how's it going? How's your week so
Good,
far?
good. Moving into a new studio here,
Woo.
so pretty empty, a little echoey, but we're going to
Yeah,
work through that.
that's awesome.
And yeah, so today I'm really excited about today's guest and some of the kind of topic in the background. We're talking a little bit about creative science and careers into design again. We talked a bit about that with Fergie. So we're kind of looping back to that topic. Do you want to maybe give us a little background on who our guest is today before we bring them on?
Yeah, absolutely. So good friend of mine. His name is Abdullah. He goes by Dr. X. He is a creative scientist. He is a product manager at this tiny, tiny company called Amazon. Don't know if you've heard of it. I think they're orange and have a smile or something. No, just kidding. But yeah, and I bring him on because we met in a fun way in a Brooklyn product meetup Slack channel, I believe. What's up, Dr. X?
Hello, Katie. Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, we really met through an awkward, I would say very awkward because I just
Yeah.
sort of joined this Brooklyn product managers or product designers channel on Slack because I had just moved to New York in the middle of the pandemic. That was a crazy decision that my wife and I did with our two cats. We moved from Seattle to New York in 2021, and we knew nobody, and it was the pandemic. So I was starting to freak out a little bit that I didn't know anyone,
Best
I
time to
had
move.
exactly, yeah. And then I like posted in one of the channels that the introduction is like, "This is where I'm living," and Katie said, "Oh, I used to live there a while back," and then I just like took a chance and was like, "Hey."
Oh,
Oh, minor technical difficulties.
Abdullah, where'd you go?
Well, I guess the internet connection is not solid in New York. So hopefully he'll come back. Um,
In
Katie's
Brooklyn.
still online, I guess.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're all
Okay.
good. We're
All
still
right.
online. Let's try him
He's
again.
back.
He's
Hey,
back. All
yeah,
right.
I touched nothing. I got booted off. I don't know why. Uh,
It's a Wednesday. Tech isn't happy.
Must be Wednesday
yeah,
now. Yeah. All good.
what a
All good.
week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
So you're
so
based in New
I
York now, right?
yes, I am in Brooklyn, New York. Is if you can't tell by my red brick background, that is real.
Love
So
our
yeah,
exposed
that
brick
typically
here.
yeah, that typically gives me away. And yeah, we were talking about how Katie and I met, and I was like, "Hey, I know nobody. My wife and I just moved here," and she's like, "Oh, all of our friends sort of left the city. Let's grab dinner." And that since then we've been good buds. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, this guy works at Amazon. I gotta like talk to him about it. But no, our friendship has grown. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to get a little bit into your background and maybe a little bit about what a creative scientist is and does. Could you tell our audience, we got about 30 people on here. You want to tell them what you're up to and what a creative
Of
scientist
course,
does?
yeah. Yeah, creative scientist is a self-prescribed name, so that's sort of my
Love
own
it.
thinking about what I want to do or what I do. So, creative comes from creativity and making things because I just ever since I was a kid I loved making things, and the scientist part comes from my educational background. I have a PhD in human computer interaction and a couple of master's degrees from information schools. And those information schools, typically what I studied was, I'm not going to get too technical and bore your entire audience into leaving and talking about super highly philosophical topics,
Oh
but
no,
essentially it's
we should.
theory of knowledge and how do you know what you know and what are things around you and like subjective knowledge and objective knowledge and things like that. So I'll stop it there. So I apply the scientific method to make things out of nothing and bring my ideas to life. So that's how I like to describe myself.
Yeah.
And as far as my day job, I'm a product manager at Amazon, and I work on new shopping experiences for everyday essentials.
Okay, nice. So PhD. I want to talk about this
Yes.
because
Hmm.
I myself have been like on the fence of going back to school just for a master's. Part of me is like, I have enough student loan debt. Why would I go back? But I mean, I
Yeah.
think just the idea of just keep pushing and keep learning. Um, but I think a PhD never crossed my mind. So what made you want to pursue one? And yeah, can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, like you and like a lot of people, actually, PhD never crossed my mind either. I was in my senior year of college, and I needed a credit to fulfill a web design certificate. So I took an elective called Introduction to Human Computer Interaction. And my instructor at the time, my professor at the time at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC, her name is Dr. Amy Hurst, who's now actually in NYU, doing amazing work with accessibility, and I can dive into
Cool.
accessibility later. Um, Kept talking to us about research and how to do research and things like that, and I was like, not really paying attention. Like, oh no, I'm just gonna like graduate and be a web designer. And dating myself here a little bit, was watching The Social Network on repeat, and I'm like, this is my next idea. It's gonna be amazing. Uh, and then one day she brought in her PhD students because she advises PhD students to
Okay.
talk to us about the research they're doing. And a really good friend of mine, Patrick Carrington, who's now a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, was talking about his research with what he called chairables or chairable computing, which is essentially working with people who are in wheelchairs, and how he can use the wheelchair itself as an input method to interact with different technologies around them. Another student was working with blind individuals and how they can navigate indoors, and like what kind of assistive technologies they can create. So I was like,
Wow.
this is really interesting. I don't think I can do this because I had like a 3.0 GPA. No kidding, like the flat 3.0.
That surprises me.
Um,
No, okay.
um, yeah, that's so I can actually dive a little bit deeper, because before I was doing information systems, I was like every sort of person from a Middle Eastern background. I was going to med school. I wanted to go to med school, so in
Ah,
college I was doing pre med, and my brilliant plan was going to med school is very expensive, and I don't want any student loans. So my brilliant plan was to study computer science so I
mhm.
can be a programmer by night and go to med school by day. That did not work at all.
Yeah.
I flamed out of both of them. When you're taking organic chem and data structures and algorithms in the
Yeah.
same semester, you'd flame out too.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just me.
100%. No, I'd be there with you.
Yeah, so back to sort of the road to the PhD. Like, I started talking to those grad students. They invited me to their lab, and I went to their lab, and their lab had an LED sign on the door, and I was like, ooh, shiny, and walked in, and they had laser cutters and 3D printers, and they're like, basically, like, I asked them, what do you do for a living? They're like, oh, they pay us to think here. I'm like, what? That's a dream. They get paid pennies, and I learned that really the hard way. But I kept going back until they were like, okay, we're gonna give you something to work on. I ended up helping out on a research project. We published a paper, peer-reviewed scientific paper, and I sort of like got the bug. Amy was told me that she, financed my master's degree by basically like giving me a job to do research and get my master's degree. And I was like, well, this beats looking for a job. And I slowly got more and more into research, more into accessibility research. I was fortunate enough to get a fellowship from the National Science Foundation, so that was covered for like 2 years to do research. So I went and collaborated with other researchers and other universities, went to Carnegie Mellon, and we invented a game to detect dyslexia by playing a video game, and that was a really huge success that ended up spinning into a bigger project. And so sort of I stayed there, and then long story short, to get to the PhD, I wanted to sort of think about design from a broader perspective because I was very deep into accessibility and making technologies work for anybody, regardless of how are they born or where were they born. And sort of that's like, if I were to say, that's a mission of mine because of my own background. So if I go a little bit even further, I was born and raised in Baghdad in Iraq. And after the war in 2003, I moved on and resettled here through the United Nations as a refugee. So given my background, I felt what I wanted to do with my life had some kind of a core mission. So that's what drove me to continue on with my studies.
Yeah. And what was your dissertation?
My dissertation was on distributed interaction design, and what that means is I created methodologies and actually built an entire system, like an online system, to run user studies, co-design studies for interaction design with people anywhere in the world. So typically when, especially in the academic field or even in in the industry, when you're trying to create some kind of new technology, say like a new headset for an augmented reality, and you want to understand how people would use it, or you want to conduct a usability study, you would bring those people in to your lab facility and do a study with them. And that's of course limited, so only people who are able to come to your lab are in close vicinity. So if you're based in Seattle, people are going to come from Pacific Northwest probably are the only ones who get to have their needs and abilities and preferences represented in this new technology. So my entire thesis was basically taking some of those methodologies that are typically been done in a lab and built a piece of technology to enable us to do that on a large scale and do it in a distributed manner online using the internet, the magic of the interwebs.
Yeah,
that's pretty incredible.
Thank you.
We haven't had to ask any questions here in a few minutes. You've got such a good story. And clearly you're super driven and motivated. Sitting here and like, oh, what did I do today? I need to get going and achieve some things. But yeah, an incredible story.
Thank you.
I'm curious. You've done a lot of everything. Did you spend time in design after the degree, or what got you into product management at Amazon from where you were?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I have impeccable timing. So I was graduating in 2020, and typically when you're finishing up a PhD dissertation, you start your job search before you defend. So you have a couple months of runway, and then you secure a job, you do your talk, you get your papers and are released into your job. And at the time that I was doing that, everybody had a hiring freeze. Nobody was hiring, and hitting up my friends at the Apples, the Microsofts, Google, everything, and everybody's like, dude, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. So it was a very bright time in my life until I got connected with somebody at AWS who were still hiring, and they were growing their professional services division. And professional services are sort of AWS's own consulting company. So think McKinsey, Bain, Deloitte, something like that. But most of the work that they were doing was on migrating. So they started out as salespeople to get people to migrate to AWS. and moving their on-premises IT infrastructure to the AWS cloud. But then that evolved into building something new. So they wanted to have a push for designers and like innovation consultants. So that's where I got my start at Amazon with the team, and that's quickly when I sort of I came in and everybody was my title was UX designer, and that's when sort of the disconnect happened where people would see the word designer, they think visual design. They think, oh, come in, make things pretty. That's not what user experience is. You need to be involved sort of earlier. And so I like went back to the drawing board and tried to like a little bit reinvent myself of like, what do I enjoy doing? I like, being in a more strategic place, connecting the pieces and not really, doing the pixel pushing and things like that, because as much as I love, going into XD, and I actually had to like remove XD now because I just like sometimes go in and start messing up with my designs, and any designer who's working with a PM is like, this is my nightmare, what are you doing? Because
Get out of here.
Exactly, yeah, I would like spend a lot of times like, ooh, I can do animations and things like that. I'm not the best at it. I didn't have my background does not include any like formal training in interface design and like visually. So I said I would leave that more to the professionals, people who are more passionate about that, and I'd stick to what I know, which is thinking at a strategic level, asking the research questions, and having the researchers helping us investigate what's happening, human behavior, how do we sort of build innovations to address those. And that's how I sort of moved on from being a UX design consultant into a product manager.
But you are very creative. I know this.
Yes.
You do a lot of pixel pushing on the side, I feel. Not even, I don't know, would you call it on the side, or do you do it for fun? Do you do it for money? I don't know if Amazon's listening, just kidding. But I know your social media, you challenge yourself with doing logos and different things like that. And you probably know more Adobe apps than I do. So what kind of keeps you motivated, or why do you feel that, what, just tell us more about that, because I know you're very creative.
Well, I think we're all creative in our own way. So that's sort of like one of the assumptions that I'm trying to challenge. And I'm like, so sometimes I like write, you were mentioning like, on social media, sometimes I write the odd Medium post here and there, or post, some inspirational Instagram things and things like that. But I simply enjoy getting an idea in my head and then making it happen. And when I say we're all creative, we're all doing it at some point. We put on an outfit this morning and we thought about what this outfit looks like. Whether we're cooking, I love cooking, and thinking about different ingredients and how they come together, and make a new recipe or something like that. But also I do enjoy visual arts. Yes. I've enjoyed it my entire life. I like drawing and things like that, but I don't think I'm at the point where I can make a lucrative career out of it. So that's why I sort of stopped pursuing it as a career. I think but I love doing it. So oops, I'm so sorry. My Do Not Disturb is not on, and my mom is saying things about watching me online. I don't know.
Oh, hi, Mom. Oh, that's awesome.
So back to doing creative things. I'm one of those people who like enjoys just picking up things and running with it, whether it's photography or doing some videos, and always disappointed because they don't look like David Fincher's shots or Christopher Nolan. But and this is not really a plug. Caity is not paying me to say this, but like I'm looking at like XD, Premiere, Lightroom. They're all open, and that's probably why my computer is overheating right now. I'm always doing things, and I love exploring and pushing
We're
the
not paying
boundaries
you
of
at all.
creativity.
But
What?
what? Yeah, I just you sent me like a Lightroom album once, and I was like, I didn't even know I could do this. I mean, I shouldn't be saying this working here, but yeah, you're definitely more savvy with the iPad apps, and technology in general. Um, what's kind of your new favorite tech you have? Because I know you're pretty passionate about some of those things.
Ooh,
Ooh,
ooh. Don't do that. I'm just gonna say something super lame. Ooh, my new mug.
your new mug.
I I just got an Ember mug, and it
Ah,
keeps my coffee warm because I love my coffee hot. And it is actually, it's worth the money because I've seen it before. Again, not a plug.
yeah, I
And
know. I'm
I'm
like,
like,
I
I'm
wish
not
we
gonna
had like a
spend.
link, a sponsored link.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
like, but to me, that's exactly what a technology is. It's solving a problem. I have a need, and this technology is solving that problem. I like my coffee warm. This is a cup that keeps it warm. And usually, I like whenever I see like an app that does a whole lot of things. I call it like feature overload. I really hate those apps when it's like, oh, you want a stopwatch that also tells you the weather and has a cuckoo clock and sings at random times. Like, why are we doing all of this? I just want the stopwatch.
yeah. Keep it simple for sure. Definitely design aesthetics and everything and all around us are appreciated. Um,
Yeah.
Matt,
I
you look
think,
like you have a question.
yeah, I've got a question. So I think we just lost
We lost
X
us.
again. So he's coming back. We'll get him right back on.
I,
That connection in Brooklyn is just not there today.
Hey,
you
don't talk
know,
about Brooklyn.
yeah, yeah, Katie, back me up here. I think it's your Melon app that keeps kicking me out. So I'm just gonna
There we
blame
go.
Sure.
that.
Anyway, we'll go
Yeah.
back to your creativity. You do a lot of this creativity on the side or just as kind of surrounding your world as
Yeah.
product manager. How do you think that contributes to kind of your perspective as a product manager working with designers? Do you think that makes things easier? Do you have any tips on for designers or PMs working together and how to make that relationship really strong?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. Thank you for that. I definitely think all the things that I had to do myself during my PhD, because I was constrained by the economics of it. Because you're on a very tight budget. You're as a PhD student, you're sort of like it's like a one person startup where you're the chief everything officer. You have to do, if you want help, you have to go after students and do the hiring and interviewing and training, and then doing PR and communication and running a budget. So like uh, we can talk about whether or not people should get a PhD. Like I know Katie, you alluded to that.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, at least, having been in those roles, it really helps me to empathize with the people that I'm working with. In design thinking, that's like step one for
Mm.
solving any problem is empathy. So yeah, if you can, as a designer, if you can pick up a couple books about product management or business or things like that to understand where your PM is coming from. Same thing with the PMs. You can sharpen up your skills and read a couple articles about fundamentals of design, whether it's visual design or system design, as you're talking to your tech team if you have a tech team. And like my background, like having to push myself and learning how to code and building things myself really helped me a lot when I'm talking to my engineers and they're like, well, the stack is whatever and things like that. It's like, okay, let's go into it and look at it. So being a very like sort of well-rounded person, doesn't matter what your job is, it'll just make everybody's life easier, yours and the
Yeah.
people that you're working with. So yeah, I believe I don't know, maybe it's like the student in me. I'm always I'm always reading something.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
definitely.
That's a
I
good segue. Oh,
oh,
you,
just uh,
you go, Katie.
okay. I think something that was interesting when I was applying for this role that I'm in now at Adobe. We're in a people role. essentially we listen to designers' pain points, their wishes for better workflows and things like that. And Damian Borba was a PM on our team at the time, and he interviewed me, and he was like, he just really stressed how important it was to be a good listener, and that was coming from a PM perspective. And he's like, master the art of listening and actually like taking in what people are saying and trying to understand what they're really asking or what they're actually expressing and things like that. So that has always stuck with me. And I think we talk a lot too about should designers know how to code and things like that. I don't know how to code, but I'm not a PM. And I think, I don't know, what is your opinion on that, Abdullah? Because like, I think if you own a restaurant, you should know how to cook, Do you think, how important is it for someone who's pursuing product management, know how to code or know the engineering side?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good perspective.
It was a long-winded conversation and answer.
No. I'm just like thinking about if you're opening a restaurant, doesn't matter if like you don't know how to cook. Like you do need to know food, and you do need to know good food. So you would, yeah, exactly. So should designers code? I would say if you're just, you should do what you're good at, but you should understand the other things. So I wrote a Medium post a while back. I think it was called the UX designers or the UX design identity crisis or something like that. In it, I like wrote out 6 or 7 different areas of knowledge of like what makes a good, well-rounded technologist. And I like tried to coin this term Renaissance technologist, because they used to say the Renaissance man, and I wanted to something like a little bit more inclusive. A Renaissance man is somebody who like knows a lot of things, and is not really a jack of all trades, but it is a jack of all trades, but you got to be a master of one or one and a half or something like that. And so if you think about these different sort of areas of knowledge, I call it like a shifting T model, where you have the breadth to understand all these areas, but you have a depth in one or two. So it's like human behavior, artifact design, as in like making things visual or translating thoughts into something that is more concrete and objective. Fabrication, which is translating those into literal physical objects. There is strategy and finance and economics, linguistics and communication, math and statistics, and programming. So those are a lot of areas of knowledge that I feel any person in sort of, at least in our industry as technologists, we should have some kind of understanding. So when we're talking to our different stakeholders, we're able to, again, empathize with them and understand them. But at the end of the day, like, what is it that gets you up in the morning? What is it that you really want to focus on and really drill down into? Is it the artifact creation? Then you're going into visual design and interface design, and that's because you wake up and you're happy to be pixel pushing, and not that that's a bad thing, or adjusting the exposure on Lightroom or something like that. Or you're more interested in what the data says, and you want to go into the different databases and run queries, then you'd be more in data science. But then you'll be a far more productive person, at least I think, to your team if you're understanding where the human researcher, the UX researcher is saying, and how your data and their data sort of work together and make a better product.
I like this kind of transition into passion too. Have you heard? I hope I don't butcher this. Is it Ikigai?
Ikigai. Yes.
Yeah. My manager Jay Ganadin introduced me to that, and so it's kind of like mapping out what you're paid to do, what you love to do, what you're good at, and things like that.
And what the world needs.
And I encourage everyone to give that a Google. I'm sure if you misspell it, Google will figure it out for you.
Yeah.
But it's a fun exercise to do. Sorry, Matt, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, I can't remember that question, but we do have a few from chat. So we'll come back. I know Jamie has some questions here. The first one's, what did you learn from all the research? So maybe I'll shrink that question down, because that's probably a large paper worth of answers. So maybe if you have like a key takeaway, maybe on accessibility, I know like a lot of that was focused, a lot of your research was focused on accessibility. So what's like a key takeaway that you see a gap in maybe in typical design teams? I think I worded that okay.
Oh yeah, no, you definitely did. Is well, the first sort of my knee jerk answer to this question is it depends, and that's sort of every UXer's answer is that it depends. But also, I have to come back to empathy, especially for like, I remember one of the first projects that I worked on. We were designing a notification system for an adaptive user interface. So basically, we wanted to tell people who are having difficulty pointing using a mouse, especially older adults or people with Parkinson, and we wanted to alert them that you're having difficulty, but without being intrusive or being rude or anything like that. And I like being the junior cocky designer. I'm like, I got it. This simple 1 pixel red line at the top of the screen that glows in and out. That's our notification. And we did some user studies with 47 different people. Zero saw it. Nobody saw it. And just because you have a great idea and you think it's amazing, you're not the user. It's not gonna unless you test it. And that's why user research or code design, as much as I say it, I feel like the industry we're not doing it enough. Like even me as a PM, every time I'm like, I'm making a decision and we didn't do research, and like it hurts. And I know the realities, like we can't always do it, but I wish we can all the time. Yeah.
I want to make a little connection there to something you said earlier too, in terms of trying to kind of globalize tests. So not just focusing on one geographical demographic because you're there. But with this as well, testing is one thing, but selecting the right audience is probably almost a more critical piece to get right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you go about that?
Well, you really got to understand is like who's your audience. So, again, going back to our core theme of empathy and, doing those user personas and understanding not only who are the people that are going to be using your technology, but who is going to be affected by that technology and the people around it. So if you're, creating a new device and you're, deploying it in a place that you're unfamiliar with, like what impact is that going to have? And you're not going to be able to understand that from the outside. That's why we in the field we have like ethnographic studies and things like that, where you really understand the people there. And I really hope we continue on with tools like like XD, because you can make a prototype really quickly, send it over through the internet, and have people actually give you that interaction. As a bilingual person, also like translation. So in college, I worked as an interpreter, and translating and interpreting are two different things. And I learned that from my parents, because they were both interpreters. And it's like, just because you translate the words doesn't mean you can actually convey the meaning and the sentiment behind that. So there's like a communication plays a big role in it. So I wish there was like a straightforward answer, but again, I'm gonna lean on my UX crutch and say it depends.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think we all lean on that crutch quite a bit.
What other what languages do you speak? I can assume.
I speak Arabic. Yeah.
Yep.
There's probably some questions in there too from the design and PM side of kind of what are some of the biggest considerations when, like, do you look at problems differently because you are bilingual than a monolingual designer or PM?
Yeah.
And what are the big things that people should watch out for?
Yeah, so especially because of the language that I speak, Arabic, we read from right to left. So layouts, making sure those layouts adapt, and also like going back to accessibility. From my accessibility days, like one of the lessons that I learned and I keep seeing everywhere is don't use red and green together to distinguish things. That's not accessible to people with color blindness. Other things like using a very long text. People with dyslexia cannot read that and try to use like bullet points and use multimedia to communicate. So a lot of teams, I'm really happy to see like over the past 10 years as when I first started as an accessibility researcher to see now like how important accessibility is. Whether it's here at Amazon, I know at Adobe, I have friends who are like basically started entire teams at Apple that are just all dedicated for accessibility, and that I really like seeing that. I'm really happy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know my friend Jamie, also my colleague, is in the chat, really passionate about accessibility. Do you think, I'm just curious,
Yeah.
when it comes to accessibility and design, should designers take responsibility and know those things? Should tools help them? I know there's a ton of like third-party apps and checkers, and big FSI companies pay big bucks to run everything they design through certain software to check for accessibility. I mean, what do you think the future of designing accessible inclusiveness is?
I think it is all of our responsibility to make sure that whatever we're making is usable for everyone,
Yeah.
or at least anybody who needs to use it. And unfortunately, one of the things that I don't think has happened yet is treating accessibility as a starting point rather than an add-on. So usually, the way, at least the way in my experience, it's like we'll check for accessibility when we get to it. But from my experience, and a professor of mine once said, if you design for the extremes, the end will take care of the middle will take care of itself.
Yeah.
And that was sort of one of the reasons why I went to the University of Washington to work with my advisor Jacob Wabrock, is because of his philosophy on accessibility, and he wrote this really influential paper called Ability-Based Design, which is this theory about the way we design our technologies. We should design them in a way that they adapt themselves to our abilities rather than us having to adapt how we interact with them based on how the designers made them. So, given that a lot of the designers are, and that's why, inclusivity and representation within design teams is so important, and diversity is so important, is because designers typically we make things from our own perspective, how we want to use it. So we're not thinking, how am I going to use this if I can't reach this, or if I have different height, different weight, different number of limbs, different abilities. So his entire sort of theory of work is like thinking of abilities as a positive only measure of like, this is how much height ability you have, this is how much sight ability you have, and you design from a place of like satisfying different needs. You'll end up with a better design, more useful and usable technologies that way.
Yeah. Do we get into metaverse for a quick second? Because
Sure.
I do worry.
Yeah.
I went to South by Southwest this year. A lot of talk about, fear of the metaverse, VR experiences, not very inclusive, not only economically, but, not everyone can wear glasses. Not everyone can do certain things. And it's like a lot of talk, but I'm curious. I mean,